Come with me through the tax looking glass.
Let's talk about, what Swedes get in return for paying all that tax.
Well, we get the buses and the trains that doesn't always work as well. We do complain about that, but we still pay. There's no way out. You get a rumbling belly, but I'm happy to contribute to the social healthcare and everything like that for everyone else.
Big revolutionaries, they don't think too much. They think push ahead. Where I really have tried to influence the taxation policy in Estonia was that taxation must be very simple.
Let's talk taxes.
So I say to working people, I will not increase your national insurance. I will not increase your VAT, and I will not increase your income tax.
Despite what the Chancellor has said, taxes look almost certain to go up in the budget on the 26th of November. Again.
A leading think tank has said taxes must rise in the autumn if the Chancellor is to plug a big hole in the public finances.
Expect the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, to have to eat her words from a year ago.
I'm not coming back with more borrowing or more taxes, and that is why at this budget we did wipe the slate clean to put public finances and public services on a firm footing, and as a result we won't have to do a budget like this ever again.
Perhaps as bad as the damage to trust, the tax system is a complex and damaging mess, and there's virtually no prospect of it being reformed. So expect more complexity and even greater frustration over tax this autumn. Chancellors can see the problem, but they haven't got the courage to deal with it.
Well, there is no logic. It's pure political cowardice, including by myself on 3 occasions.
The problem of tax reform is that losers can shout very loudly indeed. The gainers just pocket the money and disappear into the distance.
Why do we seem to find it so hard to have a grown-up national conversation about tax, both about how much we pay and how we pay it? Why are we so stuck? This is the Tax Conundrum, a conundrum I'm examining in this 3-part series for BBC Radio 4. The debate about tax in the UK tends to be rather parochial, navel-gazing you might say, and also fundamentally pessimistic. We tell ourselves what can't be done, why a change is politically impossible, that we can only marginally tweak the current system. But what if we think bigger? What if we lift our gaze overseas? Daniel Bunn is from the Tax Foundation, a non-partisan US think tank which compares different countries' tax systems and puts them in a league table. It's a ranking based not on how low taxes are, but how well they're designed. It all makes Daniel the perfect person then to ask how the UK system compares internationally.
It does not rank very well. Last year, it pulled the 30th slot out of 38 on our International Tax Competitiveness Index that looks at the OECD countries. And it has consistently been in the lower half of the index for basically every year that we've been running the index. And that's primarily because the UK, like some older countries, has a lot of pieces of tax policy that just don't make sense. And honestly, they're very complex. The stamp duty land tax, there's also the stamp duty on shares, different provisions that exclude more than half of UK consumption from the value-added tax. The list goes on and on, as you might imagine, for a country that is in the lower half and honestly 30th place in our index.
So how to improve? Mervyn King, a former governor of the Bank of England and before that a respected academic expert on the British tax system, says part of the solution is that we should look beyond the UK.
We're very bad at learning from the experience of other countries, whether it's the health service, whether it's the tax system. I mean, our tax code is over 20,000 pages long. Hong Kong's is a few hundred. Now, we don't have to go totally in that direction. There are reasons why ours is complex, but I don't think the reasons as to why it's 20,000 pages long are good ones. There is scope for significant simplification.
So where can we learn from? Let's go on a journey to the Baltic Sea. Sweden and Estonia, 2 nations on either side of the cold and shallow waters of the Baltic, have very different tax systems, very different histories. Sweden blazed a trail for European social democracy in the 1930s, while Estonia only emerged from behind the Soviet Iron Curtain in 1991. Yet experts say both countries' tax systems work better than Britain's. Indeed, Estonia has been number one in the Tax Foundation's league table for many years, while Sweden is comfortably ahead of us in Britain. That's not least because, unlike the UK, both nations don't have a shockingly complicated and damaging value-added tax system, which in Britain is riddled with zero rates and exemptions. Notably, the UK exempts some foods, but not others, under bizarre and frankly irrational criteria. Estonia and Sweden simply put VAT on everything in the supermarket.
Believe it or not, in Sweden they charge value-added tax, VAT, on food, unlike the UK. So let's go into a supermarket in the city of Uppsala, just north of Stockholm, to see what the people shopping here think about that.
I'm Lynn Andersson. I'm a student, yeah.
Oh, great, okay. And what are you shopping for today?
Gonna get some pesto and feta cheese.
What do you think about food prices at the moment in Sweden?
Very pricey, but I am a student. I think all of us thinks it's really expensive.
So value-added tax is added to food in Sweden. Does that something that concerns you? Does it feel that it shouldn't have tax on it? How do you think about it?
Since I'm a student and get paid from the state for doing my studies, I feel like I should just sit back and relax.
So yeah, I'm making a taco lasagna.
What is your name?
Hannes.
And how old are you?
I'm 25.
Would you prefer it if there was no VAT on food? Do you think that would make your money go further?
I don't think I will see such a huge difference in like my everyday living with that sort of money. So for me personally, that really doesn't matter.
Now, the Swedish government recently announced that VAT on food will be cut from 12% to 6% next year to help households financially in the face of high prices, but only temporarily. And there's no suggestion that the tax on food should be entirely scrapped. And as we've just heard, there doesn't seem to be any great popular clamour for that. I asked Jari Aalto, the boss of the ICA supermarket in Uppsala, why he thought that was.
Do you think that people buy less because there's VAT on food than they otherwise would?
No, not in Sweden. They're used to having this. They haven't seen anything else. But it's, of course, affecting the final price because it's getting higher when you add on that. But I don't think the Swedish customer thinks that way.
And so that's interesting. So the Swedish customer just accepts it as a fact of life in general?
Yeah, they always had that tax, so they're quite used to it.
So you collect the VAT and then you pay it back to the government?
Yeah, that's the way it works. We do in Swedish, it's a VAT declaration every month to pay the VAT into the system, right. And sometimes you get some money back too. It depends how the business is. So,
but pretty much everything in the store will be collecting VAT then. Right?
Yeah, everything has a VAT. We have nothing, I think, with zero.
That more or less universal VAT coverage for food is also a benefit to retailers like Jari. Unlike in the UK, he doesn't have to worry about putting 20% VAT on chocolate biscuits, but 0% on, say, non-chocolate biscuits.
Would that complicate your life if you had to go chocolate biscuit 20, non-chocolate biscuit 0?
That would be chaos, I think, because we already have so many different, both the taxes and other things affecting the price. So that would be just one more thing to think about and taking action to.
But Sweden is, of course, best known internationally, not for its tax base, what gets taxed, but for its higher tax rates. Middle-income earners in Sweden pay considerably more income tax than their counterparts in the UK. Those earning more than 625,800 Swedish crowns a year, around £49,000, face a marginal tax rate of more than 50%. So a little over half of every crown they make above that threshold goes to the government. Someone on around £49,000 in England would pay an effective income and national insurance rate of around 37%.
It's a slightly grey morning here in Stockholm. We're at the Odenplan metro station, church overlooking us. We're in a small cafe waiting to meet a lady who works here in the capital of Sweden who pays a 50% marginal rate of tax. We want to find out how that feels to her. Really good to see you.
Thank you.
I'm Ben. Very nice to see you, Veronica. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Very good, thank you. Tell us a bit more about the industry you work in and what you do day to day.
So I work in HR for an airline, and I also do payroll, so I know about the taxes. I see where the money goes.
And in terms of what you get, I mean, talk about what Swedes see in return for that tax.
Well, we get the buses and the trains that doesn't always work as well. So we do complain about that, but we still pay. We still have to pay. There's no way out.
And when you look at that form and you see a portion of your income with 50% going out, how does that make you feel?
You get a rumbling belly, but I'm happy to contribute to the social, healthcare and everything like that for everyone else.
And have you ever noticed, because with your HR hat on, if you like, that people are turning down work because I don't want to pay that higher rate of tax? Is that a disincentive for some people?
Not really. Everybody wants a high pay packet, and the higher the better. So I don't see that trend, no.
Mm-hmm. So you've never had any protests on the streets about tax in Sweden that you can remember?
Swedes wouldn't dare to. We moan, but we moan behind the walls or the screen.
Behind the closed doors.
Yeah.
That was Victoria Collins. The Swedish government is projected to collect 48% of its national income in tax this year, well ahead of the UK's 39%, which for us will be the highest rate since the Second World War. A perception of a clear link between what people get for the tax they pay in Sweden seems to be important. Back in Uppsala, I went to meet Emilia Maric as she was picking up her daughter from the local nursery.
Okay, nu ska vi gå till bilen.
Swedish childcare is heavily subsidised, with the state covering more than 90% of the cost. Emilia got out her phone to show me her out-of-pocket costs for the nursery provision for her daughter.
My youngest daughter, I pay 1,783 crowns. So
this is for a month?
For a month, yeah.
Right, so that's about £100,
yeah,
roughly, a month.
And then I pay for my second child, that's 8. I pay for an after-school club. It's 600 Swedish crowns.
Yeah, again, so less than £60 a month, which is,
so
I think for people in the UK, those are pretty astonishing figures.
Yeah, I know. But they should see my payslip also.
Right. So, when you're paying your taxes, it's quite a considerable amount of tax, but you also know what it's going to pay for.
Yeah, exactly. I'm happy about that. I mean, I also pay for education, and I also pay for healthcare. Very sick people, I'm happy to contribute to their, it could be me. I think it's absolutely fantastic. We don't have to pay these tuition fees for university, which I know you guys do, or in the US. A lot of people can't even afford getting educated. I think that's a fantastic thing. Yeah.
And do you think you're typical, or are you a bit of an anomaly in that, or do you think a lot of people in your circle feel similarly?
Well, to be honest with you, when I got the question to be a part of this, I really had to think about it. And I want to believe that most Swedes think as I do. But also, I know that people that earn a lot of money, I don't know if they're as positive as me, but when you really think about it, and if you see it as everyone's contributing to a nice structure, it's a safe structure though. But of course, when you look at your payslip, there's a lot of money that someone's taking away from you. But also, it's a social investment. That's what I want to see.
Lotta Björklund Larsson, a Swedish tax researcher, says this willingness to pay high rates of tax is partly a result of Swedish institutions and practices of record keeping going back many centuries.
The ability to tax and also to make people willingly comply is that you have organized your institutions. You know what people own, you know how much they earn, you know their wealth. And by doing that, you can tax them equitably. And this already was done in the 16th century, where we had a king called Gustav Vasa, who was fairly good at organizing the country. And from the 16th century, we had both a cadastry of ownership of landowning in Sweden, as well as, how much each land sort of provided in terms of yields, the type of crops, things like that, which allowed the king at the time tax relatively fairly. Even if it was harsh at times, it was at least, I think Sweden had the least tax revolts in Europe.
Under this reading of history, Sweden was institutionally primed to be a high-tax state. And as we've seen, high tax is now pretty culturally ingrained.
We're told that we have higher morality. We pay so much tax. It's ridiculous because it's not higher morality. The institutions have done a good job of making sure that we understand that we get something for our money, and it's our work that pays taxes in this country. It was very much enforced that, from the first krona you earn from work, you pay some taxes on it. Now the level is higher, but it's still like less than £2,000. And then you have to start paying tax. That is also a big contribution to why people believe in the system, is that I feel I've contributed. Then I have the rights to make demands on the system, right? In that sense, it's quite democratic.
OK, high taxation in a big state might work for Sweden. But would it work in the UK? Would we trust our government not to waste the money? Or might that bigger state kill off private sector entrepreneurship, making us all worse off? Ruth Curtis, the chief executive of the UK's Resolution Foundation think tank, argues that a higher tax burden and a bigger state does not necessarily mean a worse functioning economy.
I think it's really important to be careful about how we talk about this. So taxes do distort the economy. And so for a given level of tax, we should not expect that we can just put up taxes and it have no economic effect. But we also spend those taxes on public services and on benefits that can support economic growth. So then when we look at, is it good for the state to be big or small, for taxes and spending to be big or small, in general, there is no clear relationship between the two. And we can see other countries, Germany and France, who have higher tax takes than us but are more productive than us. Germany is about 20% more productive. France is about 13%. So it's certainly not the case that there is a clear relationship. It's much more important that we have a tax system that is efficient and effective and non-distortionary as possible. And we think there are ways you can get growth benefits from improving that.
So it's less how much a country takes in tax, but rather how it takes it, which affects its economic performance. I asked Nick Macpherson, who was the top civil servant in the UK and is now Lord Macpherson, whether he agrees. In terms of the amount of tax as a share of GDP, there are people who say we are just undertaxed. Other countries like Sweden, social democratic countries, just take a larger share and it serves them well. They have a bigger state, but a bigger tax take. And others say, of course, the opposite. We're overtaxed. We should be more like America. What's your sense of whether a country can work well with a higher tax system or a lower tax system? And what's the Treasury's thinking on that question?
Well, some countries can work well with a bigger state and higher taxes. I think generally it's the countries which are most socially cohesive tend to have a bigger state. So Denmark comes to mind, which certainly when I was at the Treasury, I think had the biggest state and the highest taxes.
But does the social cohesion that underpins a willingness to shoulder a higher tax burden come from a country's existing culture, or is that culture itself shaped by the existence of a larger state? These are not easy questions for economists and political scientists to answer. To try to tackle the issue from another angle, I caught a flight, a short hop across the Baltic to Estonia, a country which has a very different tradition on tax from Sweden.
Whenever you give free speech to people, then things get out of hand.
This singing together, this was our power.
If 20,000 people start to sing one song, then you just cannot shut them up. It's impossible.
Since winning independence from the Soviet Union in 1991 in its famous Singing Revolution, this small nation of 1.4 million people has sought to keep personal taxes low.
Hello, Mr. Callas.
Hello. Nice to meet you.
Hello, I'm Ben.
Would you like to take our shoes off? Or...
I don't know. In Estonia, mostly people take. In Brussels, nobody takes.
I'm very happy to. Sim Kallas is one of the key architects of the modern Estonian economy, first as the head of its central bank and later Prime Minister. When I went to visit him in his modernist home in a pretty normal suburb north of the capital Tallinn, he explained how it happened.
First of all, we started from zero. The basic idea was to abandon everything Soviet and, of course, to catch Finland and others and to catch Europe, to catch up. This was a main objective.
So it was designed with growth, to encourage growth.
Growth, and not even growth, but also structural change. But growth, definitely. Entrepreneurship was in starting point, and it was such a thirst for a rush. Yeah. Taxation is, from one sense, it is a technologically high-tech area. A lot of very complicated rules, complicated calculations, everything. But of course, the decision depends on politics. And we wanted to come back, how to say, to dancing floor.
Right, okay. Get back on the dance floor. Yeah. In other words, the design of the Estonian tax system in those early days was all about getting the country moving economically again. And one of Estonia's bold moves was to introduce a flat rate of income tax at just 26%, since lowered to 22%. So everyone pays the same rate, 22%, regardless of how much they earn. Unlike Sweden and most other European economies, including the UK, which have higher rates for higher earners. I suppose the reason why other countries, including the UK, have a progressive income tax, marginal income tax system is because of concerns about inequality. It's not fair for the very, very rich, people with millionaire incomes, to pay the same rate as someone who is on an average income. Was that not a concern in Estonia?
Yes. This is very, 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 very familiar debate. Lasts all last 30 years. It's the same. And but you know, what's my argument? My argument is that fair if the individual earns more money, he pays more because the flat tax he pays as well more. Why is fair or just to ask this entity or person must proportionally more?
Were you trying to say we will make Estonia a social democratic state, a liberal state? Did you have a view about where it would be positioned on that spectrum?
Liberal. This was highly dominating views. Of course, my views as well. I have written books about it, and my favorite heroes are first and foremost Hayek.
So a national tax system inspired by that 20th century liberal economic titan and icon of the free market right, Austria's Friedrich Hayek.
Profit is a signal which tells us what we must do in order to serve people whom we do not know.
Hayek, the author of The Road to Serfdom, a denunciation of the socialist planned economy, was Margaret Thatcher's ideological lodestar in the 1980s. Well, Estonia is in truth not the ultra-low tax neoliberal playground that intellectual history might suggest. It's a much more mixed economy. Personal income tax rates are low and of course non-progressive, but the overall tax take as a share of the economy is actually close to that of the UK, partly explained by considerable social security taxes on employers. It's also notable that after-tax income inequality in Estonia is also roughly equal to that of the UK, despite that low and flat income tax rate. And though Estonian income inequality is higher than in Denmark and Norway, it's only slightly higher than in Sweden. The liberal economic reformer Sim Kallas is proud of that fact.
We don't have oligarchs. We don't have super rich. One important thing which is outside of taxation was privatization, which actually was very successful in Estonia, very fair, very transparent. Yes, some people are rich and some people are much richer than me and so on, but it doesn't concern me because the difference is not so big. And we don't have such Gilded Age, robber barons or something like that.
Yes.
I use American terms.
But I wanted to get a sense of how ordinary Estonians feel about their tax system.
We have clients from really different sectors. For example, I'm helping a company called Shroomwell, who is the biggest functional mushroom cultivator in...
At a plush co-working place in Tallinn on the edge of the medieval Old Town, I met Kaia Gill, a partner in a public relations agency. I asked her about her views about that flat rate of income tax.
Whenever the elections are coming, then it becomes a debate. But there are many economically well-doing persons here in Estonia who have taken it their goal to promote financial literacy in Estonia, and they are always promoting the idea that progressive income tax would be one of the keys to a better well-being for the ones who don't make so much money. We want to think ourselves like a country who's doing well. So if we want to establish ourselves like this, I think that this progressive income tax is the next thing that should be implemented.
Yeah, it's quite interesting because there are people in the UK, and I think other countries as well, who are maybe on the right of this political spectrum, who say, Estonia have a flat income tax. We like the sound of that. They want to emulate Estonia. So the fact that people in Estonia say maybe we should have a more progressive system is ironic.
Yeah, but this is my personal opinion. So I am for the progressive income tax, yes.
And just more generally on tax, does Estonia, do you think, consider itself a low tax country relative to Scandinavian countries and other European countries?
I think that when we look in the history, then we have thought about ourselves like this, yes. But now when the war is happening in Ukraine, Estonia and other countries are sending our support there with the fight of this evil terror of Putin and Russia. It has had a great impact on our tax system as well, because at one point we are helping Ukraine, at the other point we are preparing ourselves. We're not afraid, but we are also increasing our defense budget. And this has had an impact on the everyday well-being of Estonians.
So perhaps the pressures of external military threats and internal politics mean the Estonian tax system will evolve in terms of how much tax is taken from the population. Indeed, the Estonian government has already announced that the 22% flat rate will rise to 24% from 2026. Yet tax experts say that regardless of what happens in future in terms of the overall tax burden, one of the most impressive features of the Estonian system is how well designed it is. Estonia has fewer distorting exemptions from VAT than even Sweden. And Estonia has also implemented one of the dream reforms of tax experts the world over, a land value tax. This is a levy which taxes the value of the underlying land of a site, not any buildings on top of it. Daniel Bunn from the Tax Foundation explains why it's so favoured by tax wonks.
The main thing you're trying to avoid with this approach in property tax is penalizing owners of land from developing that land. If a business wants to expand a factory, you don't necessarily want to penalize them through the property tax for that expansion. Or if you want to renovate your home or add an addition, you don't necessarily want the property tax to get in the way of that expansion or to make you rethink that approach.
Helen Miller of the Institute for Fiscal Studies highlights another attraction of taxing land, not buildings or other things.
The reason that's a good tax base economically is because you can't move land or change it. It's here, it's in the UK, it's stuck. You can't take a piece of land from Surrey and shove it somewhere else. It's just in Surrey. And therefore, when you tax that, people can't distort their behaviours to avoid the tax.
That's the theory. A land value tax is impossible to avoid and it encourages people to make the most efficient use of the land. But does it work in practice? I took a trip out of the centre of Tallinn to meet Martin Tam of the Estonian property developer Invego. We met at a new office complex surrounding a small public park of tall pine trees, which Martin's company had recently developed.
We are at the Krulli Park. It's really historically interesting area because there are many more than 100-year-old factories. The whole area has this naval background and industry really for the submarines.
Yeah, so there's some lovely white stone walls, but it's been inlaid with modern glass windows and doors. So who is the tenant here at the moment?
This card provides access to all the currencies in your Wise account. It is essential.
Tenant here is Wise Payments. They're actually one of our success stories, I would say. Unicorn, a startup. Estonia rooted, owned by the Estonians, but really headquarter actually is registered to the London, so it would be correct to say it's a UK company in that terms, but yeah.
But this is their Estonian headquarters.
Yeah.
I can see it's a financial technology or a tech place because we can see a ping pong table outside for the workers to relax in when they are taking a break from their work. It's a very pleasant and livable environment. So Martin, the land tax, this is something which Estonia is very famous for, which we don't have in the UK. Just tell us how it works.
I think it's actually might be a bit of misconception of the importance of the land tax because it's rather small and predictable. This complex, where we have about 30,000 square meters of office space, the land tax is only 13,000 per year, so it's hardly a burden.
So it's a proportion of the value of the land site, but
yes.
it's sort of less than 1% of the value.
Far less. And also for homeowners, actually, land tax is not applied. You can have an exemption.
Yes.
In Estonia, the real discussion is whether we should really tax wealth, and of course the property comes into play. But I think for us, we really ourselves don't consider land tax as an issue in that terms.
If they were to extend the land tax, the land value tax to property, it would make sense, wouldn't it, to keep it based on the value of the land rather than the value of the property for the same reasons, do you think?
I'd agree. A higher land tax would be incentive to more active development or kind of really think through what to buy and then when to buy. And then I think there the incentive is in place. But if you build something nice and to pay tax on that, that's for us a strange concept.
So it seems that Estonia's land value tax is not quite the economic game changer it's sometimes presented as by overseas tax reformers, mainly because it's currently imposed a too low a rate to really change incentives much. Nevertheless, it's still a much sounder foundation than the property taxes in most other countries. And tax reformers say Estonia has another ace up its sleeve. It doesn't tax company profits unless they're distributed in dividends to shareholders, which tax experts praise as something that is a powerful inducement for corporate investment. And when those dividends are paid out, they're taxed at the same flat 22% rate as all other income. The system is also almost entirely digital. The combination of flatness, simplicity, and digital-first design means all taxpayers are able to fill out their personal returns in minutes, as Kaya showed us back at the co-working space.
So this is our tax and customs board, like an info system. You can do everything online here in Estonia. So basically I have to log in to the system.
Yep.
I use mobile ID.
Okay.
I enter my personal code and then I get to identify myself. And then we are logged in, hopefully. Everything is very secure.
Ah, we're in. Yes. So
Yes.
this is your...
This is basically what I can see about my taxes.
Okay.
These are my kids, but they don't have any taxes because they're underaged.
Mm-hmm.
But here you can see that I have filled in my last year's tax declaration.
So every February you'll log on here and it'll
Yes.
say, this is what we've taken in tax, approve it or flag a problem.
Yes, but as far as I remember, I haven't had to change it. Never. This has never happened to me. No.
And every Estonian will have exactly the same interface as you.
Yes. So for example, my parents who are retired, they do also everything online. So it's very easy for them as well to do it.
It is a beautiful, bright, sunny day here in Tallinn in Estonia. I'm at the harbour looking out at some boats, some yachts bobbing very gently in the breeze. If you were to take one of these boats out into the Strait of Tallinn, which is directly ahead of me, and then travel about 230 miles westwards, you'd get to Stockholm in Sweden. So Sweden and Estonia, two very, very different countries in terms of tax. Sweden, pretty high tax burden. Estonia, relatively low tax burden. But what tax experts will tell you is that both countries have much better tax systems in their own ways than the UK does. And I think having spent a couple of days in both and seeing up close exactly why they are better, I think that lesson has really come home to me. I think the UK really could learn from both of those countries.
So why don't we? I put the question to Dan Needle. What about the Estonian system where they just have one flat rate of income tax? Is there anything to be said for that? Would it reduce complexity and other benefits like that?
So I used to make my living out of complexity in the tax system. None of that complexity was the different rates. The easiest thing in the world is to apply 20% to this amount of income, 40% to that amount of income. In the days of internet-filed tax returns, it's not a second's thought. So no, a flat rate is not simplification. Now, the Estonian tax system has lots of features which are simple and well-designed and have much to recommend them. They started from no tax system after the fall of the Soviet Union. We are the prisoner of thousands of decisions over 200 years. We can't do that.
This is what economists call path dependency. When you're set on a certain course early on, it can be devilishly difficult to move off it many years later. And Sim Kallas agrees that the UK's solutions to the tax conundrum have to go with the grain of domestic politics. You can't just import a model from abroad.
You must have your own politicians who are your own and believe that this is a right idea, not because this is popular in Estonia or introduced, but this is good for British people.
One thing that when some people say in the UK is that it's okay for Estonia to innovate and to do what it does because it was starting from a blank slate. The UK starts with 300 years of taxation history, so you can't do a big change like introducing a flat rate income tax or land value tax or changing the VAT system. Do you think that's too pessimistic?
It's very realistic, very realistic. What we have achieved in our taxation policy, which you can praise us or we can happy about it, it is mostly consequence of politics, not consequence of very wise experts. Politics combining who will gain, who will lose, how it plays on elections. In every country it's the same.
Nevertheless, Mervyn King, Lord King, argues we can improve our systems with ideas from abroad, provided we're careful. Let me ask you about a land value tax. One country which has done it is Estonia. Seems to work quite well there. Are there lessons perhaps from that experience for the UK?
Yes, and it's an interesting idea, but I think it's not something that you can just introduce in a few weeks when you're short of money and want to find new tax revenue. It's the kind of thing that requires an in-depth look as to how it would actually work, because the worst thing you can do is to introduce a new tax and then not have the answers to all the detailed questions that will flow from it. How will it apply to me in these circumstances, etc.? So I think the Chancellor will be well advised to maybe appoint a commission to work for just 1 year to examine these sorts of ideas. That's what needs to be done.
On the big choices about the size of the state and the level of tax, we have lessons to learn too from abroad, argues Dan Needle, not least in the importance of making a choice.
I have the utmost respect for someone who comes in and says, you know what, I think that we should spend a lot less on schools, we should spend a lot less on welfare, we should use the savings to cut tax. I don't personally agree with that politically, but I've got respect for it as a position. And I've also got respect for people who say, you know what, we should be more like Sweden. More like Denmark. Our tax should go up very significant and we should have an expansive, very generous welfare state. Both of those are coherent positions. But pretending there's another choice that people will be happy with is not coherent. I mean, I guess you could say, I'm happy with how things are now. I'm happy with the level of tax. I'm happy with the level of spending. Have you met anyone who thinks that? Where have we been for the last essentially 15 years? The government's been protecting the NHS and protecting pensions and raising tax a bit, but trying not to too much. And that has meant that there have been significant cuts in every other area of spending. That is making essentially everybody unhappy. What are our choices? Our choices are we continue to do that, choice 1. We cut tax funded by cutting services significantly, choice 2. Or we stop the crunch, increase spending on services, which you have to fund by taxing pretty much everyone more, choice 3. And those are the only 3 choices. And by pretending there's other choices, and there's a pretense of the left, which is we can just tax other people, wealthy people, and that'll do it. Not true. And there's a pretense of the right, which is that we can just cut services for other people, not you, don't worry, other people. Also not true. Efficiency savings, not true. But as long as we're avoiding the choice that we have, then we're in a muddle. And it's a muddle that delivers a solution that pretty much everyone is unhappy with.
The tax systems of Sweden and Estonia are not perfect. No tax system is or can realistically hope to be. And it would be naive to imagine we can simply import their systems or any other country's tax system wholesale into the UK, even if we wanted to. But we can learn from them. And it's hard to avoid the conclusion that one of the reasons Sweden and Estonia have better systems than ours in the UK, and why they seem to have populations more at ease with tax, is that they've collectively managed to make choices on tax rather than avoiding them for decade after decade. So what's actually stopping us doing so? And how do we break through the obstacles? That's where we'll turn in the third and final episode of The Tax Conundrum.
When I was a kid, I loved magic, and I particularly loved Penn and Teller because they show the magic trick and they reveal how the magic trick was really done. I think that's the political solution. If we had a politician who revealed the illusion and said, look, everyone else is either lying to you or too scared to tell you the truth. I'm going to tell you the truth. And you may not like it, but it is the truth. Maybe people would respect that. Maybe they'd even vote for that.